Welcome everybody to another exciting podcast of Bo Pete Talk. My name is Robert and with me is
Hoida!
Rightio, we're here again. The world is looking like it's not falling yet apart. Bitcoin tops $112,000 first record since May, that is US. Nvidia leads tech stock rally, so there's rallies in the streets. The Dow market at the moment is 0.49% up for the day. For the past 5 days, only 0.01% up, but for the month, we're still looking at 3.71%. Looking at crypto bubbles for the week, we have Bonk and Pengu still up and about. Floki, another meme coin. And if we look for the day, we have Pengu doing still quite well. Of course, Peter's favourite coin at the moment, Fart Coin, is up 10.7%. Based on what we spoke about last time, it looks to continue to prosper. So,
Do you reckon that's the influence of us continuing to
yeah, must
mention
be.
it?
Don't think so, because if you look at for the hour, starting to get hit a bit. Farcoin at the moment has gone down. Pengu is starting to go down as well. And one of the coins I noticed from the other day for today is most of them in the green, actually. I'll take it back. It looks like everything is going honky-dory at the moment in terms of the market. As we speak, we're talking about 8:24 p.m. EST or Australian AEST time. So those of you in the good old US, the US time at the moment, so we get an idea of where we are, is 6:24 a.m. You're waking up in the morning and we're giving you a wrap. By the time we finish this podcast, the market could be looking slightly different. Anything in the headlines in terms of the world at the moment, Peter, that stands out before we look at locally?
In terms of the news, not really. It's much of the muchness. I mean, we can always talk about Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's right.
It's boring though.
Well, the thing is, what stood out for me when I was looking at the news was it all seems to be the same in terms of Trump wants Gaza ceasefire. That's what Al Jazeera is claiming. Gaza truce possible in 1 or 2 weeks, Israeli officials says. Zelensky urges West to hit Russia with sanctions. That's from The Guardian. I should have mentioned that previous two sources were Al Jazeera and SBS Australia. ABC says Russia fires record drone attack at Ukraine after Trump criticises Putin. Here we go, Sydney Morning Herald, 8 hours ago. Poland scrambles fighter jets after Russia targets crucial Ukraine hub. And another big news headline that's just starting to vaporize possibly is the Epstein files. A lot was made about it. It's pretty interesting, isn't it? I mean, I don't know if we're going to spend too much of this show on it directly, but I always find it intriguing what we know and what we don't know and what we will never know, Peter. Let's start with what we will never know. Let's connect it, not directly, we don't have to go directly, in terms of the Epstein trial. Sorry, the Epstein files, not trials.
I guess it's probably something that we'll never know is the full list of who is on there, who is not, or who is on there, I should say.
Well, they're saying at the moment, as we know, for our listeners, that there was no one and there's nothing to talk about, nothing to see here. Interesting. We have Ghislaine Maxwell in prison, but if there's no one on the list, why is she in jail if she wasn't soliciting prostitution on this infamous island? Because Trump yesterday said, and let me quote, when I say yesterday, possibly 2 days ago now, "Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?" He was quick to point out. He interrupted when a question was asked directly to one of his cabinet ministers, of course. So obviously the big talk, and we're talking about on X and most social media outlets and right-wing commentators are very disappointed with the Trump government and how it's been managed. And we talk about the FBI, with the head of FBI being also, and some of the other champions in that Trump family of MAGA, who are now saying nothing to see here.
It just goes to show that regardless of what happens in politics, the politicians tend to align on certain subject matters. Regardless if they're left or right, and Surprisingly, a lot of them, I would say, oh, look, me personally, I say government's a center-left style of running a country anyways. So anyone who's in politics is that center-left side anyways. But yeah, it just shows that, how closely aligned all the parties really are out there.
I find it really interesting because I do follow a lot of podcasters, both right and the left. I do enjoy whether it be Como, Newscombe, and going right through to the right, Megan Kelly, Tucker Carlson. I don't know about Candace Owen these days because she's all over the place, to be quite honest. She does lean towards the right, of course. Patrick Bet Davis. I found it interesting on the right side. They're not very pleased in the fact that it's nothing to see here, that the list is all of a sudden vanquished. I wonder what long-term ramification that is going to have. It is still trending, mind you. There have been 1.29 million posts on the word Epstein on X, okay? So it's something maybe they're hoping that will die and die a natural death. People move on to the next big story. But there is a lot of Trump, if you want to call them supporters, that are disappointed with the management of this. They were expecting a lot better in terms of, if we talk about, to be straight, direct on this, if we look at her name, which is Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, remember in February she claimed that the Epstein files were on her desk and she promised a public release. And now, obviously, her rhetoric has changed considerably. She was sitting at the desk when Trump said, why are we still talking about it? So they're obviously playing the long game and hoping that's the Trump government that it just goes away.
Well, yeah, like you look at it. It would have been one of those kind of cards that they use to get power into government. Anyways, now that they're there, we're going to follow the status quo of we're not weird. Who wants to release this anyways? Because you don't know that half their names are probably on there to begin with.
It might not be them, but it might be very powerful people. It could have a detrimental impact on the economy. It could be some conspiracies that we suspect, and I don't know which one. I'm not going to even mention any of them, that are then proven to be true. It could be a major disruptor. We do not know that clearly.
Well, just think, like, in terms of disruption, if you take out all the political donors away from the next election, what happens to the next election?
But I see more than that. I see that it could be a major detrimental impact on America and what America stands and represents and its way of life. A major disruptor in that sense. Trust in government could be brutally shattered if it's as deaf and gloom as people think. I mean, what gets forgotten is that the rhetoric now from Trump and co is that Epstein's a horrible person, horrible man, dirty man, whatever you want to call him, label him as much as you want, but there really isn't any client list. Now, that, like I said, they've made this because they were part of the election campaign and promise was the release of these Epstein files. And all of a sudden they're saying there's nothing there. And even the video footage of his death, which a lot of people claim possibly could have not been a suicide. It could have been very powerful people behind that. Now, I don't know. I really don't know. But you don't want to leave it open for interpretation. And that's where I think they've left it now by doing this. People are going to maybe overread and believe there's something more. Or there could be something more. We really don't know. And it doesn't leave them in a good place at all. And I'm talking about the trust in government. I kind of laugh because the connection I make for our listeners is thinking of Kevin Rudd, believe it or not. And let me explain what I mean by that. I might have mentioned it on a previous podcast, but I think of the Rudd 007 campaign where there was such a renewed hope and promise when Rudd was going to be when he was campaigning to be Prime Minister in Australia, Kevin Rudd. And as soon as he did win the election, there was certainly a lot of optimism and belief that the saviour has come, almost beyond the human being, what he's going to do. And there were think tank sessions set up, some very big think tank sessions set up in order to how they were going to fix or make maybe Australia great. They didn't say that back then, but of course it was of that ilk or feeling. I'm not talking about in terms of conservative or ultra conservative. I'm just talking about in terms of the feel at the time and the media rhetoric as well. I almost feel like the whole MAGA movement is centered around the great hope, the great savior, the Messiah. We sometimes place too much belief and sometimes too much hope in someone that's going to be beyond the swamp, beyond the politician, is going to be truly Christ-like almost in their approach. They're not going to be a politician. They're free from corruption. They're going to be like, what's his name? Two-Face. What was his name before he became Two-Face in Batman? What was his name?
Dent.
Harvey Dent.
Yes.
Yeah, before he got corrupted, of course, or turned evil and vile based on his misfortunes. But yeah, obviously that's a make-believe story. But we place this hope, this Superman. Now, ironically, Superman's coming out in the next. Well, it has just been released in the US and Australia and the rest of the world. That someone beyond and he's free of politics. But in the end, they all become the same.
Yeah, and I think that's where I guess people in general romanticize about
Yes.
saviors, or more importantly, it's, oh, someone's going to save me from this. I guess rather than looking inward and saying, what can I do about XYZ, take your pick, it's like, oh, how am I going to be saved by this person? How is it going to benefit me? So on and so forth. And yeah, so and you see it even in pop culture, like, it's not so much pop culture, in culture in general. Like if you look at cinema stories, it's always about, some like underprivileged person, like that had a hard, youth or upbringing, and then they go out to the world and become something, magical or super or spectacular. But the reality is, in the real world, none of that actually happens. But somehow we are made to believe, and we feel like that happens on a regular basis.
Yeah, there are so many examples, and they become passing ships in the night. You think of Greta, our little environmentalist crusader. We think of many other celebrities that come and go. So, coming by the night, where all of a sudden they become a fad, they become bigger than who they represent. And I also think of here, there's a politician in Australia who was the lead singer of a rock band. For those of you that aren't Australian, the band being called Midnight Oil, and Peter Garrett. Likewise, there was a lot of hope when he was going into politics, given his strong voice on social justice issues through the lyrics and the music of Midnight Oil. And what is very interesting is that once he actually got in as a Labor minister, he just became part of the machine, or got lost in the machine. All of a sudden his strong word or strong words and conviction were lost in the system. I just feel that too many examples of that happen, that what we're sold is very different to what we actually get from our politicians.
Yeah, well, if you look at your example that you gave of Peter Garrett, at the end of the day, he joined a party which has its own political belief system. So to think that he was ever going to make a change within the party, yeah, he can make a change, but a small change. Like, there's no chance that you can make a sweeping change as an individual, no matter how famous you were before you joined politics.
It's a really interesting one because you don't get that politician that has a long. I mean, another good example is Barack Obama, an excellent talker, excellent communicator, did lead with class and distinction, I must say, but he was just another person or politician that created as much division as he sold us that wouldn't be the case as part of his. If you ever get to read his book, what was the book called? Is it called Audacity of Hope? It wasn't his book that he wrote. I'm just going to look that up right now.
Yeah.
And in that book he talks about bipartisanship and the need for change and reform, but again, just vaporizes in many ways. Now, obviously, if we had him on the podcast right now, what's called Audacity of Hope, he would say that in many ways, and that's part of his ability to be an amazing politician, he would argue and do it eloquently that he did make a lot of reform and wasn't just a normal run-of-the-mill politician. I would argue possibly otherwise, given what eventuated in his time. But in saying that, we cannot dispute he did lead with a lot of class and distinction. And he did give a lot of hope for people, and particularly minorities in America, given his background. But a lot of times we hope for more than what we actually are going to get and get delivered.
Yeah, especially looking at Barack Obama. Yeah, a lot of people would have pegged him, especially minorities, as the savior for their plight. You know, things are going to get better now that we've got the first black president. But if you were to compare um, him to another president, I wouldn't say he's any better or any worse. Like his run in office was as non-special as any other politician. There's nothing special.
I'm just looking up something I found pretty interesting about Barack Obama. I'm going to share with our listeners. I actually looked it up. Hopefully it's going to populate for me. I'm waiting for it to populate, but nonetheless, it doesn't matter. I can keep winging it, so to speak. Actually, Barack Obama's track record on deportation. What do you reckon his record, or what do you think his record looks like, Peter?
It's quite high.
Yeah, yes, that's right. And sometimes we wouldn't think that, because you're talking about his representation for minorities. Approximately 3.2 million individuals were formally deported during Obama's presidency. Notably, in fiscal year 2013 alone, there were 438,421 deportations, marking the highest single year total of the 20. How do those numbers sting for you?
Look, I don't. I'm not surprised by that. I've heard similar. Like I never knew the figures. Because I never remembered those figures. But it's in line with what I've heard about his presidency. So does not surprise me one bit.
What about as a peacemaker? Blessed are the peacemakers, as Jesus said in the Beatitudes. He did win a Nobel Peace Prize in 2009. He did strike up, some people think, a very bad deal. If you're Trump, you'd be saying that, or Trump followers, the Iran nuclear deal. He was involved a crucial role in the Paris Climate Agreement. This was heralded at the time as a major global step towards environmental sustainability. Obviously, Trump's withdrawn from that since. And one of Obama's early promises was to withdraw US troops from Iraq. By December 2011, the last US soldiers left Iraq, fulfilling that campaign promise. Now, Libya intervention 2011. The intervention aftermath is considered by many to have been a failure, with Libya struggling with violence and instability to this day. Obama himself has expressed a regret over the lack of post-Gaddafi plan. Because remember, NATO led airstrikes in Libya to help rebels overthrow Gaddafi.
Yeah. I also heard. Yeah, one of the things that I heard about Obama's presidency when it comes to, I guess, conflict, that it's one of the highest levels of, I guess, bombs used for any other presidency, when compared to any other presidency.
Yeah, that's right. That is often said. In fact, Obama's use of more bombs than any other president. You can imagine I'm hastily looking this up right now, and I have heard it. There was a significant increase, as I said, particularly with the drone warfare expansion that occurred. And I'll repeat again, Pakistan, the likes of Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, Afghanistan. Obama's administration conducted, get ready for the number, an estimated 10,000 drone strikes in the Middle East, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Okay, casualty estimates between 2,500 and 4,000 people were killed by drone strikes under Obama, with many of these being in Pakistan and Yemen. I spoke about the Gaddafi intervention. Also, remember, Obama was involved in authorized airstrikes against ISIS. Now, ISIS is a result of America pulling out of Iraq, or actually going in Iraq to start with and then pulling out. Whether historians want to look at it otherwise, there are many that argue that's the case. Airstrikes in Afghanistan. The US dropped thousands of bombs in Afghanistan, including precision-guided munitions and smart bombs aimed at the Taliban, of course, at the time. So, and remember, he was there when they actually found Barack, what do you call it, Osama bin Laden. There's a whole documentary on Netflix for those that are interested on that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people review ex-presidents, and I'm going to say this in general, ex-presidents or prime ministers or heads of states with rose-colored glasses. So, they tend to look at a lot of the positive, which is quite odd because when you look at your interrelationship grievances, they always tend to be focused on the negative.
So when you look at this, remember he did receive the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009. Is it as outlandish and preposterous when they talk about Trump being considered for Nobel Peace Prize? No, I would say to that question, I don't know how any of these guys can be nominated for Nobel Peace Prizes, and that including Trump particularly. But I look at Barack Obama and I think possibly it was done as a tokenistic, positive appraisal of the sentiment attached with the media with a first-time black American president.
Yeah, I think it was kind of like propped up as, hey, we've got the first time we have this type of president. Let's see what we can kind of give him, type of thing. But on the other side as well, what I will say is when you look at, I guess, like the Nobel Peace Prize, I look at it more as in if a person does actions to bring upon greater peace rather than greater conflict. Now, so that would mean, leaders who, put in, I guess, measures and steps to reduce the impact, reduce the chance of all-out war happening, that which would lead to World War III. Someone who did actions for that would qualify as for the Nobel Peace Prize, and that's where Barack Obama would have qualified for.
Yeah, really? But he was elected president in 2008, and then he received the award in 2009.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you think about that? Oh, he was actually inaugurated on January the 20th, 2009.
Yeah, look, I like I said,
What
I
an
think,
amazing president. He must have done quite a lot in such a short period of time. You
yeah,
can
no,
see my
I
sarcasm.
yeah.
I don't
Oh,
get
look,
it.
I don't buy it as well. But
Yeah.
I'm just saying that um, there is a, how can I say, a tyrant can receive the Nobel Peace Prize, depending on the actions that they've done, that brought upon some level of peace. Because the reality is you'll never have peace completely. It's contributions that people make.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? That such a short period of time that would be considered.
Well, it's like I said, I feel that was something that was trumped up for his benefit, and that by his benefit, I mean Barack Obama's benefit. Like I said, it's a milestone presidency when he took office, being the first, African American person to become the president. I think something similar will happen when we have the first woman president as well. Not necessarily the Nobel Peace Prize, but there'll be something along the lines of that stature happening towards them as well.
Kind of loses what the actual award represents, possibly when we go down that line. It's wonderful to see where we become a world of equality, of course, but the prize isn't really is more than that, isn't it? When you think about it.
Well, when you look at it, you want to live in a world where everyone has equal opportunity, right? And that's the key word, equal opportunity. Once you start equalizing the outcome, that becomes a different issue, right? And then it doesn't become equal opportunity for everyone.
Okay, that's interesting you say that. So let's move on. That was a really engaging conversation that we just had. Aussie shares. So we're going back to finance. Lift on iron ore rally.
Well, we're a large exporter of iron ore here in Australia. Generally, we ship that off to China, and
Hmm.
then in return we build use it for building whatnot, and wherever we need to use it in industry. It's something. The way I look at it, like when it comes to resources, especially like iron ore and iron. It's always going to be needed for construction because it's always cheaper to make it and bring it in. Looking at like what's needed here in Australia. We're getting high amounts of immigration. That means dwellings need to be built and created. So I think it's an industry, at least for the short term foreseeable future, is going to be generally on a upward trend.
So do you think it's wise? Obviously, we don't give financial advice here, Do you see it continuing if you were crystal balling?
Oh,
Iron
look,
ore shares and mineral resource shares are still a vital part of what makes up your possible portfolio in
well,
Australia.
like the little information that I know about like minerals, and that's what, and I say that on purpose because I don't want it to be taken as
Mm.
any form of advice. Like when you look at like mineral operations, like say for example, if you go mining for gold, right? You don't actually, yeah, like your operation is not really going for the gold, even though the gold's there. It's usually taking out minerals like copper. I think there's some titanium, depending on where you go, and other materials like that, which are actually useful and have good value as well. So generally, like I guess if you look at the mines that we have out west in New South Wales, they generally their main produce, I guess, from that is copper, and that funds the mine, and it gives it a slight profit. Now, on top of that, there's all the gold that's being extracted out as well. And that's even like the bonus, like on top of it, that really makes the expedition really profitable.
What about gold? We mentioned that before. It's still a winner, isn't it?
Well, it's a safe store of wealth. So if you're feeling like everything's going to come down in the short term, gold is a great way to dump your money into, and you know that it will be as valuable today as it will be in the future. That it won't magically gain that much value, but it will store the value for you.
And what do you think the numbers are like if we look to look at gold then? If I had started investing in 2000, you ready for the numbers? Okay, let's look at it in US dollars. Okay, so we are more applicable to our listeners. I had it in Australian dollars in front of me. All right, 270, 300, 2000 to 2005. Gold started the millennium around 270 to 300 per troy ounce. Began a steady climb by the end of 2005, 500 to 520. All right, to present, what do you think it's on now, given those numbers?
It's probably look. This would be an absolute guess. Probably in the $2,500
$3,300 to $3,400 per ounce range.
Yeah,
How about that?
that's
It is something worth considering, isn't it? And what? How does one what's the best way to purchase gold? Buy a block and put it under the bed?
nah. You do it through your commodity exchange. That's where I would do it. I wouldn't actually want to actually hold anything.
Yeah, yeah, okay. And there's a lot of it. There are a lot of commodity exchanges out there for our listeners. Just do a quick Google, you'll find them. We won't list and name them because, again, we want to remind our listeners we are not financial advisors, but we do like to look at what's out there to invest, and that's the point of it.
And something just to add on gold, right? The value that you've just put through, like in terms of from the early 2000s all the way to now, what that shows is how much our currency has deflated or inflated, I should say. Sorry, that's the correct term. In that time period, like obviously it's not just inflation. There's a little bit of growth in there. Like I said, gold is a store of wealth. It's not something that you invest into to make money on. Um, yeah, it's really interesting to see how much inflation has actually taken away a lot of like our buying power as individuals.
But yeah, let's look at this. So sticking to the theme of since 2000, okay? I put into the Gemini AI, what's the best form of investment since 2000 in Australia? Doesn't stick to giving me one, of course. It says, however, residential property has also performed very well. International shares have generally been the strongest performers in Australia since 2000 when considering total returns over the long time. Diversified portfolios heavily weighted towards growth assets like Australian and international shares. Sorry, I meant to say. For most Australians, believe it or not, it says this: superannuation fund, especially a well diversified, balanced or growth option, has likely been one of the best performing investments over time. How about that? The miracle of superannuation.
Yeah, but see, if that's the case, right, what's stopping you from mimicking what they do as an individual?
Exactly. And that's where there's some really amazing packages out there with shares now. People are aware of out there ETFs for investment, because that's something that I've looked at, and they do a lot of the guesswork for you. First of all, let me explain what an ETF is. It stands for an exchange traded fund. So what they do is they hold a collection of assets such as stocks, bonds, and commodities. I want to give you examples of it, and the one that I've been researching a lot about are your Vanguards as a good example of ETFs that you can acquire. Now, if I give you examples of ETFs in Australia, I'll list them actually. It's a good idea. All right. Like I said, you have a Vanguard. That's one option via your stock exchange. If you use, for instance, the likes of the popular one being ComSec, often referenced. You can buy Vanguard ETFs, and there are a variety of Vanguard ETFs out there. One of the popular ones is the VAS one, okay? There's the Beta shares. Now, they're highly competitive and very low cost ETFs, tracking Solar Active Australia 200 Index. You have iShares, you have SPDR, and as I said about the Vanguard, one of the popular ones out there that does perform well over time is the VHY, which is the Shares High Yield ETF. International shares, you can acquire them as well. You don't have to stick to just Australian shares. And remembering in Australia, do you understand, Peter, about the fully franked credit and how that works?
No, please explain. And for the listener's sake.
All right, okay. The way it works is, and this was a political issue with Bill Shorten losing the election in Australia, because they were looking at touching that up, and a lot of retired people were very cranky and irate, because the way it works is, imagine a company makes a profit, okay? So we're talking about the big companies here. One good example, Wesfarmers, okay, as a blue chip share in Australia. The company will pay the corporate tax on that profit, of course, to the ATO. Now, the company tends to pay about 30-odd%. Yeah, it's going to be a lot lower, being company business, than income tax when you're on a high income tax bracket. The company then gives out or distributes, obviously, the profits via dividends. That's why I mentioned Wesfarmers. That does give you a decent dividend return. They normally distribute that twice a year. The shareholder then pays personal income tax on that dividend. So what that means is, without that franking credit, the same profit would effectively be taxed twice, if that makes sense. So in other words, the company would pay that profit. Does that make sense, Peter? And then you would pay for that profit as a tax as well. Does that help to make it understand?
Yeah, it definitely does, yeah.
Yeah, so it's actually, now when it's fully franked, the company has paid the full corporate tax rate, which is currently about 30% for most companies. As I said, the example I'm giving is Wesfarmers. They would be working also for BHP. That's another good example. Commonwealth Bank shares, another example. So they pay it on the profits, okay? So let's give an example here. Let's say we have $100. That's an easy number to work with, okay? The company will pay $30. You agree? 30%. That's why we're using the $100. The company now has $70 profit, not that $30 anymore, yeah? The company decides to give out that $70 as a dividend. Because it has paid the $30 on the $100, it can attach a $30 franking credit to the $70 dividend. As a shareholder, you receive $70, a franking credit of $30. So, in terms of the example, you then calculate your personal income tax on this grossed up dividend of $100 based on your individual marginal tax rate. Once your tax payable is calculated, the 30 franking credit is applied as a tax, and this is important, offset. This will reduce the amount of tax, of course, that you pay. So you can see why it was one that was, I guess, upset a lot of baby boomers back when Bill Shorten was trying to get in as Prime Minister. A classic move that I saw our friend, what's his name, who just lost the election in Australia. I've now forgotten his name, Dutton.
Peter Dutton, yeah.
Dutton. I mean, his big thing was nuclear energy. Why I mentioned that, the correlation or connection is, it makes me wonder some of these politicians or opposition parties. And Dr. Houston's another example where he wanted to bring GST in, and he was up against Paul Keating at the time. And why I mentioned Paul Keating and who was up with against, because Paul Keating's famous quote when he won was, "This was the election for the true believers." And in saying that, because the odds were all stacked against him. And I'm giving these examples, Peter, of politicians that all they had to do was keep their mouth shut, and possibly they would have got in, Peter.
Yes, especially when they've got it in the bag. It's just ride it through, and then when you actually have an opposition that's worth fighting for, you start bringing up your policies.
Yeah, I don't know if I explained it well enough, but that fully franked credit, because I didn't want to go into the fine and news show eventually how you ended up maybe paying only $15 rather than $30 tax. But basically, and those that are in the know, and it will be your boomers in this example I'm giving, if you're touching their hip pocket, you're going to be disillusioning your voter base or possible votes. And it is important to point out that possibly Peter Dutton, I mentioned about his desire to open a nuclear plant, but I think it was also, you mentioned it previously, Peter, how he wanted to, with women, impact on their, well, I say women, other people as well, but I think a lot of women were cranky by it. And
Well, I would say he isolated women.
isolated, yeah. Yes.
Mainly because, and I said this mainly because women tend to do more unpaid work, especially around the house.
But
So being able to work from home is a big benefit.
yeah. Just to explain it, I was waiting for you to explain it. That's right. We're relating to listeners how he wanted to touch up, if that's the word to use, working from home. He was very keen on wanting to do something about that or remove that ability to do that. That's a can of worms, isn't it?
Yeah, and that was for obviously public servant jobs, but once the public service really starts to shift away from something, the private sector is very quick to follow as well.
It's really interesting. It all relates back to the start of today's show. And maybe today's show is all about the fact is that are our politicians smart, and are they true to their values? What do they represent? And the reality is from today's episode is that our politicians are just as fragile, naive, and sometimes as stupid as we are.
Well, they're not going to be winning Nobel prizes for physics or chemistry or anything like that.
And a lot of times there's several themes here today. If we were to map it out, let's look at our good old mind map here. The themes from today, really, to summate today's episode. Obviously, the first one being about a lot of politicians go in believing they're going to change the world. Yes? And then somehow they get sucked up by the system. So I'm going to say sucked up by the system, number one, all right, in terms of what happens to our politicians. Number two, some become so driven by, what's the word you told me about? What's that expression the other day you were talking about? That Kruger, what was it?
Dunning-Kruger.
Yes. You want to explain that, and then I'll tell you how the Dunning-Kruger effect works for this.
The Dunning-Kruger effect, basically, in a nutshell, is as when you look at a particular subject and you start learning the basics, you compensate your knowledge of that topic. So you will believe that you are awesome at it, but because you have so little understanding, you don't realize how much you don't know. And then as you start to become more and more competent in a given topic or subject or task, whatever you want to look at, you start to realize how much skill you do lack. You tend to be able to evaluate your abilities more in line with what they actually are.
Yeah, and I look at that. So remember I said the first one, they get sucked up by the system, our Peter Garrett's and co, if you want to look at it, and even maybe we could argue Trump now. And then you're Dunning-Kruger, I look at it in terms of you get some of these Dr. Hewsons and whatever you want, many other examples that they lose sight of. Like you said, they think they know a lot more than they actually know. Is that the way to put it, Peter, in a way?
They're overconfident when joining politics.
Yeah, okay. And obviously when they go opposing another political person and party, they lose sight of the basics, I guess, and they try to bite off more than they actually can chew.
Yeah, I think the best way to do it is or to think about it is, so you join politics and you have no idea what's going on, but you made it somehow, and you start talking about all the stuff you want to do because how what your beliefs are, etc., etc. So that's low skill, high confidence, right? And then let's just say from there you are given an opportunity to have an important role within government, right? So it doesn't matter what role it is, but it's an important role. You then, because you realize what's going on, you tend to then even out and actually drop your confidence because you realize how out of depth you actually are. And then as you obviously get more and more skill, you slowly start to come out the other end, and you find that on the other end they all tend to be roughly the same.
And the next one, to continue on this list of our politicians, that and actually the third one, and third may possibly and final one I want to point out that we discussed was there is this where we raise this the great hope, and we believe, and the media are good at that, and we believe the next Jesus is here, or possibly Luke Skywalker is here and he's going to be the last hope or new hope, he or she, and it never does sadly eventuate that way. Something I didn't mention that was worth mentioning from today's news and headlines in terms of finance and money, the RBA's decision on interest rates, of course.
I missed
Yeah,
that.
the meeting occurred on July the 8th. The official cash rate target was 3%. The RBA decided to hold the cash rate steady at this meeting despite market expectations of a 25 basis point. The RBA had previously cut the cash rate by 25 basis points in May 2025. But unfortunately, they didn't. They pretty much left things as they are. Investors out there and people trying to get into the market, I guess.
Yeah, when you look at the RBA rates that come out, that's the cheapest interest rates that anyone can possibly obtain, which most people can't obtain. So that means the money by minimum is at 3.85%. And that's still quite high when you look at some household debt. What they have, it's still a high percentage.
Is it?
When you look at household debt, if you go into debt for $1 million, 3% each year is quite high.
So the interest rates back in the 80s hovered around 9 to 10%.
Yeah, no, but the debts weren't that high. But it still was hard to.
What about when it hit 17.5% in January 1990?
Yeah, but the debts weren't so high. You didn't have $1 million debt at that period.
Yeah, I'm just enjoying playing with the numbers here and
Yeah,
throwing them at you to get a bit of a
yeah, but
holistic
20, but how about this? But I'll put it like this: 20% of 10, right, is 2, but 3% of 100 is 3. What's a harder number?
I know this already,
Yeah.
but we've had an episode already on this. We've already had an episode on this about the misconceptions that sometimes can be skewed or brought out there in terms of believing that things were way more difficult back in the good old times of the 80s, recovering from wearing flared pants of the 70s. But I guess when you look at it, there's a lot more moving parts. Cost of living, cost of owning a home, and that is a big problem in Australia, the cost of owning a home in Australia. And we've done a lot on this already, but that's why it was worth talking about interest rates and the impact that's going to have on people. Now, what's the inflation sitting at, the inflation rate this year in Australia? Now, that's important, because this is all in the mix when we look at it, yes? Rightio. What do you think's happened?
Okay.
All right, this is very important. Now, you want to explain what inflation means, first of all?
Basically, with inflation, it's just the cost of goods, how much they've increased since the year before. And that's not just one good. Like, if you look in between goods, like if you look, say, the price of cheese last year to this year, that's not an accurate way. It's a basket of goods and services that they put together to calculate the inflation rate.
Yeah, okay. So looking at it, we did have a terrible time in 2023 when we were hovering about 7-6%. Yeah, it's now starting to go down. This is important to point out to our listeners. There is a level of expectation that it will continue, because if you look at the quarters in 2024, Now, remember I said 2023 they were sitting at 765.4, 4.1% over the 4 quarters. Then in 2024, with government intervention, we've gone down to 3.6%, 3.8%, 2.8, 2.4%. And the March quarter, that's the one to really look at, 2.4%. So it has stabilised considerably. It has fallen significantly. If you want to look at it, 7.8% in late 2022 to 2.1% in May 2025. And that's a big hurdle if inflation wasn't controlled.
Yeah, it definitely is. And just to even add on top of that, I even see reports here that the inflation rate's down to 2.1% after uh,
Okay.
leading into May. So that's even better when it comes to the numbers there.
Well, I'm going to throw another surprise. The unemployment rate, that's part of it. Remember, we're looking at the whole package here. It sits at 4.1%.
And
What
that's a
about
pretty
how?
low rate, by the way.
Yeah,
I'm going to add on top of that. Yeah,
it is, isn't it? It's been fantastic for quite some time.
yeah.
All right, what about houses in past 2 years in New South Wales? We'll start with the big state in Australia, of course. Sydney is always often mentioned.
Yeah,
Well, I'll throw this at you. Ready? The Sydney median house price around July 2025 is reported to be around about I'd say about $1.5 million. The annual growth at the moment, this is from the NAB, they're saying about 1 point plus positive 1.6%. So that's the past 12 months to May 2025. Other data out there, say Domain, real estate of course, they're looking at about 1.7%, they're saying, in Sydney. So it has slowed a bit, appreciation. Since COVID, Sydney house prices, but so we're looking at May 2020 to May 2025. What do you reckon the numbers looking like then, Peter?
I would say it will be much of the muchness during that period.
Growth of over 27%.
Really? Wow.
Since the onset of COVID, some specific inner city, Sydney and northern suburbs have seen median prices double over the past 5 years.
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant in the last couple months. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was talking about 2020 May to May 2025.
Yeah. No, they've gone up significantly.
Yeah, and there's other factor in this, supply shortages is still with new houses continues to be a problem.
Well, it's I see. With the thing is with that, I say it's supply shortages because you've got more buyers than there are sellers, right?
Yes.
That's how I look at it. Like because if you look at how immigration works and everything like that, we're always going to have immigration, but because there's more buyers, that means prices are going to go up, and they're willing to spend the money on it too.
There we go. I think we've had a fantastic episode in that we've managed to, and I'm glad we did towards the end. I was going to wrap it up a little bit earlier than that, but to really look at we should, and we nearly missed it, about interest rates. So, again, like we started the show, it's much of the same old, in terms of what's going on around the world and even at home in terms of the economy. Yeah, the wars are still raging a little bit. A few little prickly things come out in terms of disappointments, e.g. the Epstein files. We didn't talk about the Diddy case and a few other things in the past few weeks. But overall, let's keep soldiering on. Any advice to finish off on, which we can't give Peter, so we're not going to give any advice, but I guess advice in terms of becoming more informed.
Look, if you're interested investing, just make sure that you're reaching out to people who are capable of giving you the advice and who are allowed to give you such advice.
Well, I'm going to finish the episode by disagreeing with you. If you want some really good advice, keep listening to the podcast. Please subscribe and listen. Make sure you subscribe. We are also now on YouTube, Peter, aren't we? Our marketing producer has got us on YouTube as well to
Yes,
watch
we're
the
on
episodes.
YouTube, and we're posting episode updates on TikTok, Instagram.
Wow.
And I'm thinking I think we're looking also to try and get onto Apple Podcasts.
Wow. That'd be good.
Yeah, as much places as kind of we can get to. So that way, then we've got as much coverage as we can get.
So keep listening and we'll keep providing as much rich information. We are not advisors. We're not advising you exactly what to invest in. We're just like everyone else. We're bang smack in the middle of the bell curve. Two guys chewing the fat and hopefully making all of us, including ourselves most importantly, more informed so we can be valued, hardworking, cogs in the machine called the economy. And as they say, we're trying our best to live by greater reward for greater effort. On that note, my name is Robert and with me is
Peter.
See you next episode, everyone.
Bye.